This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Today's guest is a spectacular human being. I've had a little bit of contact with Carolin Hauser over the last several months, as she's been one of the people who have really moved my wife and I into being in a relationship that's actually working. And in many ways, that's on the shoulders entirely of what Carolin Hauser has added to our relationship. And it's not just for me and Alex, but for everybody that she has contact with. So it is with excitement, and it is with honest pleasure and humility, actually, like a humbleness to be even on the same planet as Carolin, but to introduce her to you and to be here to have the opportunity to explore the conversation we're about to have is a glorious opportunity. So welcome to Humanity, Carolin Hauser. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm very grateful to be here and excited too.
It's really great to have you. Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative 8 today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation. Welcome to Humanity. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at or listen to any of the podcasts that we've done before on the Welcome to Humanity podcast chain. But one of the questions I like to ask, it's like a 9-letter question, and it's a full question, grammatically correct and everything. And there's only 9 letters into it, and it'll put you back on your heels a little bit for most people. But it's a good place to start. So we're going to start there. And that question, Carolin Hauser, is who are you?
I am a light being from another planet that came here. My purpose is to help bring peace between the feminine and the masculine. I'm also having a complete human experience. Even though I'm a light being, I still have to go through everything that humans are going through. And sometimes I feel like even more magnified because I have to have all kinds of experiences so I can help all kinds of people. Yeah.
So what does that mean? What does that mean? Not every one of us knows exactly what a life being from another planet. It's not like, oh, she's one of those. And we don't know what you're talking about when you say that. So can you go a little bit deeper with that?
Yes. And actually, I didn't know this either. All I can say is I realized it a few years ago because I just kept realizing that for some reason, there's something a little different about the way I see the world and experience the world than everybody else. And, most of us when we're born, probably people that are listening here, most of all of you, when we were growing up, we felt a little off. I did that too. But for me, it's more of a part of what sets me apart. When people meet me, what they will give me as feedback is like, I just don't seem to be able to live inside a box. My norm is living outside the box. I was very fortunate to be raised by parents that were very free-spirited. I could never, for the life of me, I could just never figure out what I was going to be when I grew up. I just knew that I was here for a greater purpose and to help humanity, but try to make money, as that, try to find a job as that when you're 18, 19, 20. So it took me until my mid-30s, which isn't that long ago, to really have the kind of clarity I have now on who I am and what I'm doing. And it's still getting refined. Is that a little better?
So what is it, if you had to answer that question in a three-dimensional world, what you actually do for a living, or how you put man and woman energy together and how you landed on this planet to do the work to make a difference, what is it that you do?
In a nutshell, I really help bring back love and peace into relationships. And because I've been in this field for over 20 years, I have many, many tools, and I'm also an intuitive. So there is a framework that I work with people in general that kind of gives like the container. And then because of being an intuitive and having a lot of tools, it also just depends. But, for the most part, when things aren't working, and I'm from Germany, so I like to be, even though I'm woohoo also, but I'm also very practical because I'm from Germany, so I like to make it scientific and really simple. The lens that I look at through in life is everything's energy, and Einstein told us that, right? So when things aren't working in my world, it just means that things have fallen into a low vibrational state of being, because when things are in a low vibrational state of being, that's usually when things don't work, whether it's a relationship, money issues, whatever. I happen to have honed in on relationship stuff, but to make it simple, it's always just how did these people end up in a low vibrational state of being, and what do they need to release or learn or apply or practice in order to get themselves into a higher vibrational state of being. Because once people can do that, life gets much more easier and you get back into the flow. No matter what the conflict was, what the past hurt was, what the patterns are. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm curious, I think we have, again, speaking from those who are just being introduced to the idea, and which isn't, I suppose it isn't me, but I'm speaking for those, this concept of a low vibrational state of being, then the inherent intention to move us to a higher vibrational state of being. What do you mean when you say, different states of vibration, and that everything's vibration, and that you're quoting or at least paraphrasing some Einsteinian realization? Like, what do you mean that it's all low versus, and why do I have to go high vibration if I'm hanging out in the low? What's better about being at a high vibration?
So I did not do any of this research. I'm just standing on the back of several guys like Einstein, and then Dr. David Hawkins is another one. Everything is energy and everything vibrates at a speed. So think in terms like electricity or current, like everything moves us, or sound waves or anything like that. So when things move or vibrate slower, measurably, they are vibrating in a lower vibrational state of being. So what science shows us is that when somebody is angry, for example, if we measure the energy output from the anger, it's literally like around 70 or something. Courage is around 200. Love and bliss is between 500 and 600. So these things are measurable. So when you're angry, you're like the lowest vibrational frequencies that we could fall into or be at are shame and guilt, and they're at 20 and 30. So and this is not my research, this is Dr. David Hawkins. Everything that's below 200, below courage, will die depending. If it's close to 200, it will die slowly. If it's really close to like 0, it will die very fast. It will just basically decay because of the energy is not life-giving enough, basically. Everything being above 200, it goes towards more life, more energy, more vibrancy, more aliveness. So that's why we want to be in a higher vibration state of being.
Yeah, there's a demarcation. There's a major demarcation at around 200. And just for the record, do you know what kind of units? 200 what?
It's hertz.
What's it measuring? Hertz. Okay, hertz. So vibrational. That's simply the measure of vibration. And below 200, which is also fascinating, that courage itself sits at this demarcation line. That courage sits at the line in between livable and doomed in some ways. Yeah.
Totally.
So say something about courage. Like, when I land on my courage, am I then already over the edge headed towards a life vibration? And what is courage? What is courage that wasn't there under 200?
Yeah. So usually people go from, being apathetic and depressed to first anger. Even though anger is a low vibrational state of being, anger is usually the thing that catapults us towards doing something differently, which that's courage. Courage means to do something that you're scared or that you've never done. And usually we're scared of the things that we've never done, and to do them anyway, right? To do the things that we're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, but have the courage to just do them. Trust in something higher, trusting in, not our experience because we haven't done it, just trusting in our intuition, our, or higher sources, or just an inkling or whatever, we have. And it's like in the Crocodile Dandy movie, I think it's where he has to step out on the ledge before the bridge appears. That's courage, like stepping before there really is a
Mm-hmm.
bridge and trusting that you will be caught or, that the bridge will appear. There was a second part to your question, which I spaced out on, I think.
Well, I guess I now have a different second part, which is it seems like courage is built on the shoulders of trust and intuition. In other words, I have to somehow agree with myself that my intuition is worth listening to and pursuing for what it is, the message that it's giving me. I have to at least reach a point to submit to that, to surrender to the idea that my intuition is worth following in this particular case.
Yeah, intuition or a desire, basically it's like something is pulling you forward, right, towards something better. So you're willing to give up what you know in the past in order to move forwards towards something that you hope is better, right? You're betting that it's going to be
Yeah.
better.
Carolin, there's sometimes with me, and, so we haven't even used the word constellation yet, so we probably should get there soon. But sometimes with me, I notice and I assume in retrospect that it was my ego or some sort of counterproductive influence that has me consider following my intuition down the rabbit hole, like into even lower vibrational territory. Like I get what I get. I'm feeling angry or sad or, dismayed or powerless. And I'm like, well, might as well get worse. Like somehow I'm drawn down that rabbit hole, which isn't upward necessarily towards a higher vibration. How am I to know which one of those is different than the one that calls for me to be courageous, taking on something that I've never done, or something that my heart is how do I know when it's coming from my heart rather than from another source? And I guess I hope you understand the question. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, we're compelled to do things that is not our intuition and our higher self speaking. And so, what I do partly with people and what I had to do in my own life is to learn to distinguish really what is what. Is it just the voice that wants to keep you stuck and in the same rut and in the known, or is it the voice that really has your highest interest at heart? And for me, it all comes down to the body really knows the truth. And so I use there's tools that I use where I go around my mind basically and just really use my body as a tool for feeling, whether something like you have a distinct feeling, whether something feels really good in your body or not. It's very subtle. It's not as loud as the voices of the ego or anything. But the more you train yourself to feel it, the better you get. And over time, it isn't so subtle anymore. But most of the time, when we grow up, we're not taught this. And because it's so much subtler, it takes people practice, just like anything, anything that's worthwhile, to learn to feel the difference, basically.
The difference between being drawn forth by my heart and being drawn forth by some sort of counterproductive influence.
Yeah, the ego usually, the thing that wants to keep you where you are.
Right. Mm-hmm. So we mentioned it, or I mentioned it just a few minutes ago. So constellation is a big part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're at some kind of party or a get together, a dance, a cocktail hour or something, and someone asks you what you do, and you say, "I'm a constellationist." Is that a fair?
The proper term is Family Constellation Facilitator, but most people do not know what that is, here at least.
Yeah, tell us what it is.
The easiest way to describe it is it's a modality that shifts energy, and it does so by, I have to backtrack a little. The way that we see the world and the way that we create is 95% determined by the images that are in our subconscious. The subconscious lives and breathes in images, memories, past stuff, even ancestral trauma. And so any decisions that we make, that we think we make, 95% of the decision is influenced by whatever our subconscious deems as survivable in a sense, and the rest is 5% our conscious mind. Now, depending on what pictures we basically have in our subconscious is what we create in life. And so when we're frustrated because consciously we want to have a harmonious relationship, but in our programming, we don't have pictures for healthy relationship. Let's say, in our subconscious, there's only pictures of fighting, then we will end up fighting, not knowing why, and being really frustrated. But it's because of that picture. And so what the constellation work does essentially is it takes the faulty picture and puts in the picture of what you truly want, right? In this case, pictures of what a healthy relationship would look like. in a sense. And so this is why it's so powerful, because basically our subconscious is responsible for what we're creating. And if we have the right pictures in our subconscious, then our subconscious mind and conscious mind are in harmony. And then we truly are unstoppable. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes beautiful sense. I think so. So let me see if I can recreate it for you. 95% of what we do as humans is based on, or I'm sorry, what we do as humans is based on how the world occurs to us, or the pictures that we draw from, generally from our past, that really reflect the things that how we walk through the world. And 95% of those are in the subconscious, and only 5% are in the conscious. So even if I say out loud that I'm interested in having a great relationship, that might be my conscious notion. But if 95% of what I've been exposed to, or what I recall, or how I see the world of relationship has it going in a southern direction, in a direction that's non-workable, I will in fact carry on in that direction and be confused and conflicted with the idea that I want a relationship that works, but I keep doing things that don't have that. And what your role is to replace those 95% of counterproductive pictures with pictures that are then consistent with whatever it is my conscious mind says that I want, or whatever it is, in this case, like a relationship. And the consistency between the subconscious and the conscious then becomes much more dominant. Then you can get a reflection of having a world that is working in alignment between the conscious and the subconscious, by exploring what you've done by replacing old worn out pictures with new ones. Is that close to true?
Yeah. It's hard to put these things in words, but when I go into the experience of what happens after somebody has a session, what you're saying is, their life starts working in the things that they want.
And so your special skills, or, the things that have you at least know yourself even as perhaps more different than all of us know ourselves to be. You said it includes being an intuitive, and that it includes, really almost forcibly, you don't even know how to live in a box, let alone living out of the box. So there's an opportunity, to use those skills to find out where your special power was or is, and that happened in your 30s. Can you describe a little bit about how this all came to fruition? What happened in your 30s for you to get that you could actually apply these outstanding, characteristics? Outstanding, they might not be outstanding if you weren't using them properly. You could just feel like an outsider, but how you are using them is really making a difference with humanity. So what happened, as you recall, in your 30s? What happened to your picture of the world that had you decide you could step forth and do this odd job?
Very practical. I got divorced, and had no child support payments or bank cards because I'm German, no loans. I don't have any rich parents. My whole family is in Germany. So I had to figure out how to make money, quickly.
Wow.
Life was very practical,
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And it was just like, okay, how am I going to subsist now? And then you just drew on you're like, oh, I know, I got these special skills.
I had the skills already. I just didn't know how to make money with them, right? I didn't know how to survive with them. And so I had a lot of practice, and I knew that I was really good at what I was doing with my friends and for free and, all that kind of stuff. And also I was living in Santa Barbara, and in order to survive in Santa Barbara at that time, you had to have at least $5,000, at least. And I still didn't have a car with $5,000, but I had food, and I was a single mom, and I had two small children. And I was also recovering from chronic fatigue. Mm-hmm. And all of this got set off by a near-death experience where my body collapsed, and I was just done. And that kind of set me off on the path that I'm on, realizing I needed to do things very differently and leave the relationship all kinds of ways. So I started being courageous, because I was stuck in that relationship for a long time, 7 years, and didn't have the courage to leave because I was so afraid of not being able to support myself. And so once I got the courage to step out, then for me, the math just didn't, if I would have worked even 20 hours a week at $15 an hour, because I don't have any degrees or anything that are employable, I would have never made what we needed. So I needed to figure out how to make money at a much different level and quickly, with about 10, 15 hours a week that I really had in terms of time and energy because of the kids, and I was still recovering. And so the only way that worked was to go into basically a very specialized service, offering something, where people go to a specialist almost, and therefore are willing to pay a premium price, so to speak, for the outcome, like a trainer, mm-hmm. a special trainer or a special coach or something like that.
Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff there. You have your two small children, you have your divorce, you have your disease, or debilitating, at least, at the time, a debilitating disease. You have a a near-death experience, which you kind of glanced over. You have you have recovery. You're broke. You're from a different country. It's game time. It's game time at that moment. And then out pops this. Was there a download from your other planet to create this, or what the hell happened?
So when I got catapulted out of my body,
I'm sorry. Not everybody is going to accept that initial clause. So you're going to have to talk. You have to say a little bit more than starting a sentence with that, as if we understand what the hell you're saying.
So basically, my husband at the time came home from work, and I was super, super exhausted, and I had been exhausted for like a month. And he came home, and in an attempt to make me be heard, I just said one more time, I can't do this anymore. I need help. I just can't be home 12 hours a day and watching these kids and have no support. And he was also overwhelmed because, just with two people and running a whole family and household, it's stressful. So in his defense, he didn't mean what he said. Probably he wasn't thinking about it. But he just said, well, you wanted to be a mother. And when he said that, when he uttered that sentence, for some reason, my whole being felt like I had been sentenced to death. And so I was like, I'm not doing this. So literally what happened was it looked like a panic attack. My body just collapsed and started having like breathing issues, basically. And I myself was under the ceiling looking down. We had a futon on the floor. My kids were on my body. They didn't know what was going on. They were crying and besides themselves because they were just very disturbed. And even seeing them like that didn't make me want to go back from hovering under the ceiling and looking down at myself. And then in that moment, source, God, whatever, said, Carolin, your work isn't done. And I was sent back into my body. And for an entire week, I was suspended in just pure consciousness. And then that experience ended abruptly after a week. But because I had tasted it, and I've known now that it's possible, and I know what it feels like, and all of that, it became my mission basically to figure out how to get myself back into that state and how to help others to get into that state. Because while I was in that state, everything was flowing. Like I would have a thought of something, and that something, I couldn't even determine whether I was thinking of the thing first or the thing was there first, right? Like it just instantly manifested. All my needs were met. People, I had no fear. Everything. People were friendly. It was amazing.
So I think I've revealed this before on this podcast that, I've had a couple near-death experiences of my own. And on the other side of them, when the decision gets made that there's more work to be done, life is altered fundamentally. Not only how it occurs, but the universe's gifts to assisting me to get what it is that I'm up to going, or to amplify it or give me the tools out of seemingly, at least unexpected spaces happen to me. And it sounds like there's something like that with you that, now we have a clue what you meant when you said you're catapulted out of your body and that you're hovering over the ceiling, looking at yourself and your two kids who are kind of freaking out while you're having what looks like an earthly near panic attack and, being sentenced to death by being told by the father of your children, or reminded by the father of your children that you said you wanted to be a mom, and then like translating that to a sentence, for death, and like, okay, this isn't going to work like this. And then sort of being catapulted, regrouping, reconstituting, and coming back here more like who you are now than who you were the day before that.
Oh,
happened.
yeah. Yeah. And what became really clear was that, I had made decisions or basically ignored myself and my body and everything that I felt that I needed to do for myself for so long that I had gotten myself in a very low vibrational state of being. And that's why, my health, my finances, I was not living my purpose. Like all areas in my life were totally in the gutter, right? And so conversely, when you start working on lifting your vibration, all of your life, the entirety of your life lifts up. And very quickly, like for me, it turned around within a year. I was starting to make 6 figures and a multi-6 figures from never making any money, other than waiting tables and babysitting for $5 within like 2.5 years of that experience, just as like that's a tangible measure.
Yeah, we'll say that's the earthly measure of some form of success. There's some metric there and how much money you can.
Also a sign of like really, before I was doing dishes and diapers all day long, I obviously was not doing dishes and diapers anymore for that money to come to me, right? It was
right.
a sign of like me stepping out into service and helping a lot of people.
How old were your children when you got catapulted?
My son was 16 months and my daughter was 6.5 years.
And now how long has it been since that day, approximately?
It actually was right around, it was like in April or May of 2012.
2012, okay.
Yep.
All right. And is this a reward? Are you glad to be here? Are you destined to be here? Are you stuck here? Are you like, where are you? Like, is this just the only desperate way you have of getting through the earthly experience? Or is it really a calling? Is it something that you're bringing forth some high level spirit to?
Yeah, the way that I remember it is that I didn't have to come back here. I was done, and Spirit asked, or asked people to raise their hands, and I raised my hand. And sometimes I'm mad. I'm like, why did I raise my hand to come back here? I have days like that. Sometimes more than others, but I did not have to come here, and I'm here because I truly love people and my own pleasure. It makes me truly happy and fulfills me to help other people. And that's part of my bliss. And what I was going to say, like part of what the message was from that one weekend coming back out of the catapulted state was they or source challenged me to go into pursuit of pleasure, a meaning to like really explore what pleasure is on a greater scale, because we're all sold on like pleasure is wine or pleasure is chocolate or pleasure is shopping and while they are fun experiences, they are pale to the experience that you can have when you can be truly yourself and be free in your body and experience true connection, in my opinion, in my experience. So a lot of the work that I do is actually around helping people redefine pleasure and rediscover pleasure and help them grow their pleasure IQ, pleasure intelligence.
Brilliant. Thank you. And, being a recipient of your work here, I wouldn't argue that. And in fact, I would, redouble what you're saying, because that's who you've been for me and for Alexandra. So one of the things that you also said early on, and maybe even the first thing after telling us that you're from a different planet, that you're up to, putting together the men and women and the man and woman energy. And my guess is that there's an intimate connection between this pursuit of a new definition of pleasure and putting together the man and woman as a function of why you're here. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good observation. Well, we all have feminine and masculine within us, and in creation, in my world or in my worldview, creation happens through the feminine and the masculine principle coming together. The feminine and the masculine are actually a whole, and what's happened through I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years, I believe that the people in power know that there's nothing more powerful than a human being that's united in itself, and then couples that are really harmoniously united. And so the people in power have done whatever they can do to put us up against each other, create confusion. Like the biggest war that's going on this planet is the war between the genders.
I agree with that.
We don't see it that much, and it's to keep us weak. And so I believe that when we within ourselves become whole, because we stop being in conflict with these two energies within ourselves, that's what makes us able to then also be in a union or in a relationship with someone else, in my case with a man and in your case with a woman. And there is nothing more pleasurable than you being whole and authentic and just you without having any inner conflict, right? When you live in harmony, there's nothing more pleasurable. And when you're in harmony, you're in flow. Not that there aren't challenges, at every level,
Yes.
But you go at them differently.
So I get that. I mean, it seems like there's a bit of a synonym here, or at least interdependence between this notion of harmony or flow with the whole notion of what pleasure is. And the pursuit of pleasure then seems like, at least is no small part, is the pursuit of obtaining harmony and flow. Now, is that something that I can find in the higher vibrations more likely than in the lower vibrations? This notion of harmony and flow, does it sit at a different symphony in the 600 vibration than it does at the 150 vibration?
I would have to look it up, but so love is 500, unconditional love is 540. I do believe that harmony and bliss are even above that, and then the divine, the state of oneness is at 600 or 700. After that, we dissolve into light beings, like Jesus and all those other ones that weren't here for very long. Part of why they weren't here for very long is because they lived at such a high vibrational state that they just, the body can only withstand so much, and eventually it just dissolves back into light if we go higher. So in essence, if we're here, it's not the goal to start vibrating at 1,000, but if you can vibrate, somewhere around 500, 600, you're going to have a very peaceful experience, and you're going to be a light bringer. And just your experience of life will be very different than if you vibrate at, 200 or 150 or 20.
Well, you I think inadvertently, but maybe not, have now kind of exposed for us a little bit of your own lifeline, your own evolution, because you weren't just born on another planet. You called yourself one of these things, a life being. And so as a life being, I guess what I'm wondering and making sure here, confirming that meant that in a previous life, you had lived at a vibration higher than what was supported in an earthly setting. And so you exited early and came back as one of those or one of them or a life being, like to bring this work down to this planet. Yeah. Correct me if you can.
What I remember is having just regular human lives here on Earth. And then I also remember living at a different planet where the vibrations were very differently, where you not necessarily had a body. I mean, you still had a body, but it was very different. There was peace. There weren't the conflicts that are here. Like, I literally have a memory of living in a paradisical place. It's very real to me that that's possible. And so sometimes I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, why is it so difficult here? Why are people making it so difficult? Because I truly have a memory of that place exists. And I also have a very solid belief that it's possible to have that here, to bring that here, to live it here.
Now, did you say a perimythical? Is that what the word what was the phrase you said?
Paradisical, like the paradise.
Paradisical. All right. So you remember that that as something that not only is conceptually worth considering as a direction, but actually lived in. Actually experienced ontologically, you have a recall of that. And so it can be stunning to you that many humans are like making it so difficult when it's right there to be had, or it's potentially to be had anyway, this paradisical.
And also with my own nervous system, like I had PTSD, I have had all kinds of things, addictions and stuff to go through. And the frustration with knowing and having lived the other way, and then that's why I said I still have to go through all the human suffering and experiences that, just like any other human being. I don't have a shortcut or anything like that. So
Right. And that's probably the source of what you're talking about when you say that some days you wake up and wonder why the hell you chose to come back. Yeah. It's like, whoa.
I'm a little mad at myself. Like, I could have had it so nice and easy.
Yeah, right. I know. I get that completely. And that, that happens to me. Seemingly, it happens to me nearly every day, and sometimes for a little bit of a segment of time that I'm also wondering, like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking to come back here? And then something happens, like a conversation like we're having right now, where I start getting, I'm going to say I start getting courage. Courage shows up, and I'm start doing stuff that I've never done before, or having conversations that I've never had before, really exploring what's out here that I've never seen, or how to carry on with whatever magic or contribution I have to offer in my listening and speaking. And then things start generating again. And so all of a sudden, I'm no longer living in the poor me, angry, sad, hopeless, aimless self, but now I'm start living in a world where I'm dancing with people with similar enough vibrations to carry each other forward and make a difference in the world.
Yep.
Do we have access to, I think I heard you say this, but I'm really wondering, do we have access to creating a greater percentage of our time, or actually, acknowledging, it almost seems like I'm thrown into those low vibrations. Something happens, maybe it's a touching of a core wound, or maybe it's just I woke up after a dream of some sort, or, or I see something or hear something, and boom, I'm definitely under 200, probably in the single digits sometimes. And how is there a way of me increasing the frequency of being in a high frequency?
The first thing and this was one of the most powerful things for me to learn, is that we don't have power over other people. We don't have power over the circumstances. They will always be there. What we do have power over is our own vibrational state of being. And it's literally muscle that you train, like anything at the gym, right? So it's just being disciplined and making your own vibrational state of being a top priority, or, getting to a point where you just can't take it any other way anymore, and you're going to start doing the things. A lot of it has to do with, being more protective of your environment, creating routines that sustain you, feeding your body well, like doing the things that make it so that you can be stable. Like, there's things that we do that we know when we do them, we don't feel like great. they're not helping us to be clear and stable and emotionally in a good place. And so for me, it has a lot to do with having healthy routines and sticking to them. And the more you do, the more they lift you, and the more that you're lifted, you don't want to go back to doing the other things. And when you do, you're like, oh no. And Carezza is part of a practice that couples can practice with their lovemaking that contributes, in my opinion, greatly to being able to self-regulate and keep yourself. When you're in an emotionally stable place, then stuff can get thrown at you, and you might have a quick like wig out or something, but you can catch yourself and get yourself back into just being stable much faster. And it's practice. It's practice.
Okay, so, can't let you bypass this one either. And so thanks for bringing it up. But more than often, more than likely, most of or many of our listeners have no idea what you're talking about when you throw out this word carezza. So, and that you link it to this concept of lovemaking, and people call that, sex or fucking or whatever people think that is. Can you shine a light for us? I certainly know a little bit about this, but can you shine a light for our listeners? What are you talking about when you say carezza? I mean, you're talking some high vibrational stuff all hour so far, and now you're bringing carezza in here. What's the deal? What's carezza?
It's again not something that I came up with. I just happened to, it just happened to be thrown in my path 4 years ago. Carezza is a form of lovemaking that has existed for 100 years or something, 120. And a woman named Marnia Robinson started doing research on just sex and different sexual practices, because she noticed that her relationships, they would start out great, and then inadvertently after a few months they would deteriorate, and she was just not going to have it. And I was in a similar situation, and that's why the book resonated so much with me. And what she found out through her 16 years of research is that basically we have two programs for lovemaking. That one is the one that we know, where we have sex and we have an orgasm, and that's what that's how we think we bond and what we think is normal. But what biologically happens when we do that is that we actually get kind of fed up of each other, and our perception of each other shifts based on hormonal things that happen within our hormone system, our nervous system, and so forth. So it's basically what Marnia is saying is that when we have regular sex with orgasm, based on our biology, what happens is the deterioration of the bond, basically. And so carezza, or bonding-based lovemaking, is the opposite, is a second way that we can make love that we don't know of, that's also pleasurable. It's different. It's not, you can't compare them in a sense that, that you will have an orgasm, but you will have something that starts feeling much better because it creates stability and really good feelings that are not just a few seconds or a few minutes, but all day, every day in your everyday life. When you start practicing, it starts generating an energy field, in a sense, between the two people that practice. It creates a tangible bond. And therefore, and this is, what Marnia basically found out, is that it helps us stop the deterioration, mostly based on our biology. And so a lot of the practices I was talking about, the feeding yourself correct and having routines and practices, they have to do with helping our physical body to be in harmony, because we as human beings, we have the physical body, the emotional body, the energetic body, and our spiritual being. And for us to be in a good place, the physical body is like a big part of it. And so one of the ways that we can help our physical body when we are in a relationship is to learn about the second way of lovemaking that we normally don't know about, to help our biochemistry stay stable, in a sense. So it's again, it sounds woohoo, but it's actually very scientific, and it's biology based.
Yeah. So what's Marnia's
Cupid's
book?
Poison Arrow.
Cupid's Poison Arrow. And, Alex and I, of course, read that together, and it is remarkable. And we're easing ourselves into maybe more and more of that. I'm usually, if anyone's going to break it, it seems like it's me. Is it the same? And I should say that when we're on a streak, when we're going at it, whatever carezza has taught us, I am getting a taste of having a stability that is absolutely not even in the conversation of what's there with normal, regular orgasm-based sex. So is it a different experience for men and women? And how do people... It would seem to me that women would be more interested in this than men, at least coming out of the gates. That could be completely sexist in its basis, but it does seem to me that men are like, if I'm not going to come, then why have sex? And women, I think, are at least more naturally trained to consider the possibility that they might not come, either because of the men not being able to get that done with them, or because sometimes women don't come and then they say they're, had as much pleasure as they would have if they would have, or something like that. But this idea of not coming, of not having an orgasm during lovemaking is a little bit threatening and challenging, I think, to the man's ears. Is that true with women, or what is the difference that you notice as you bring forth this practice?
I mean, it's all over the place because, there's women that are very sexual and they're like, and there's a whole, there has been a whole like women's, and I actually came from that where like, no, if you're an empowered woman, you have an orgasm a day, that's like your liberation. It's your right. That's where I came from.
Right.
I thought something was wrong if that was happening. Right. So there's a whole movement of that. Then there's women who, for some reason, don't enjoy sex at all. Then there's men that, have problems. And then there's men who are afraid if they don't come, they get blue balls. Then there's a whole movement of men that don't want to give their semen because they're into like the warrior. And there's a whole big movement of like practicing semen retention, which is not correct. I mean, that's part of it, but they do it so that they stay like warrior, like, that they don't give the energy away. For them, it's not about creating the connection. It's all over the place.
Well, let's talk about those men. I think this is really interesting. So simply retaining semen during sex is a different, if the intention is to, pump up my chest and create a warrior-based archetype in how I'm pursuing my world, versus semen retention semen retention with the intention of being in carezza. What is the basic difference? I mean, what seems like if I'm not coming, I'm not coming. I should be able to get what I get by that.
Well, the basic premise of bonding-based lovemaking or carezza is that it's an energy exchange of love. That's why I say lovemaking, because you could have sex and not come, but that would not, that doesn't necessarily mean you're bonding and you have an energy flow going. So you could go through the mechanics, but nothing would be happening in terms of like how you're feeling or connecting or, it's just going through the motions. And that's what a lot of people do. And that's why they don't get anywhere with it, because they're not starting to have any magical kinds of feelings, because they're just going through the mechanics of like, just not coming. And so the premise of bonding-based lovemaking and carezza is that your focus is off of you and on your partner, loving your partner through everything that you're doing, kissing, touching, sending energy, being intimately connected. It doesn't matter, but your whole intention is to be in tune with the other being and be there for them. All the other ways of making love, it's usually about ourselves. Like we usually touch the other person to get them turned on so that we can have pleasure with them. Or we, like for men, oftentimes it gives them something to give pleasure to women, right? It strokes their ego to make women come or make them feel good. Or that's probably one of the biggest hurdles to overcome for men, right? That they have to stop making the woman come because they get a lot of out of it from doing that.
Right.
And so that's the challenge, because for me, I'm not that strong. When you're trying to do that, then I'm not strong enough to then say stop. But if he has my best interest at heart, and if he knows that I don't want to be on a roller coaster, which I evidently go on when I have an orgasm, then, the focus becomes to be selfless and just be focused on the other person's well-being for both. And when they both do that, then it becomes magical because there's an energy that's generated that's more delicious than having a quick orgasm.
Brilliant again. So let's see if we can tease this out a little bit more. So the warrior dude, the guy who's like not going to come because he's, he doesn't know if he's going to get in a street fight tomorrow, or he doesn't know if he's going to have to kill an intruder, or just, whatever he's up to in his world of keeping strong and fierce and ready to warrior, necessarily paying attention to his partner with a full focus on, I'm bringing the partner pleasure or the partner satisfaction. He's not focused on that. He's just focused on not coming because he doesn't want to lose his seed. If he loses his seed, then he's going to be a less effective warrior, or less effective in the ring. That's a completely different intention than somebody who's having sex or having intercourse or making love and spending all of their energy, really all of their energy, devoted and committed to the pleasure of the other. That's
There's a really good video on YouTube that explains a little bit more about the energetics, because basically we have poles in ourselves, and I'm hoping I'm getting it correct from my memory. But basically the genitals, the men and the genitals of the woman are a pole, and then the hearts of each are a pole. And when we have regular sex, what we do is we basically just engage the lower poles, and one of them is plus and one of them is minus, and they go in a circle where it, plus minus basically.
Mm-hmm.
When we only have regular sex, all the energy never goes into the heart center. It just stays in the genitals and gets dispersed out. Whereas when we make bonding-based love, what it does is the penis of the man activates the sexual organs of the woman. Then the energy rises into her heart. From there, it then travels into his heart. And from there, it travels down into his genitals, and it becomes a circle. And basically, if there was a light bulb attached, that would make the light bulb glow, because now we have that's how it was intended. What happens when we make love in this way is our batteries get filled. They don't get depleted. There's some of the studies that Marnia has found, they prove that depression goes away, addictions go away, chronic pain goes away, immune system gets stronger, all because we're using the machine, in a sense, the way that it was designed, which is to help each other to get regenerated instead of getting depleted when we do it in the other way. And so if we don't have the right intention, the heart will not get activated. And then even you might not have an orgasm, it just stays all in the lower quadrant, basically, and doesn't, her heart will not get fueled, and then there's no energy going from her heart to his heart, and then there's no circle.
Yeah. So in the circle, it seems like this would be something that would be very arousing, a new level of arousing, a new expanded level of arousal. And I know for me, I think that, if I get super aroused, I'm going to be more likely to not be able to control my eject. So, I'm going to be like, if at least I equate that in my mind, that if you show me or be with me.
That's interesting because, well, the component that's different about bonding-based lovemaking and regular lovemaking is you never really go fast. You always stay slow. It becomes very pleasurable, but you never. The part of us that wants to have the orgasm is the mammalian brain. And so there's a way, when you start noticing yourself wanting to go faster, that's when this brain kicks in. And over time you'll learn, to notice it, and then just taking deep breath and really relaxing deeper. So it's very different, because when we normally make love, most of the sensation comes just to the genital friction, right? The pleasure that we experience. When we make carezza love, we take our attention away from the genital friction and start having whole body experiences through the deep relaxation and connection, and it really becomes like a spiritual experience, like a mystical spiritual experience through the relaxation. So there's sometimes very little movement, but extreme, like waves of pleasures, and the slightest touch or movement can make you feel like it's for me, it's an experience of like flying, really being high and flying together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
If one of you or both of you should, like, it's almost like, how do you avoid making orgasm evil, if you will, or just the wrong, or, it's like in that situation, it seems like orgasm is not welcome. And, okay, so now you had an orgasm. Now you're going to be on a roller coaster for a little while here.
Yeah.
Like, how do you incorporate that should, in fact, you cross over that threshold?
Well, in my own experience, what has helped me the most is to just, commit to not having an orgasm. And then when it happens, you feel, you have, in the beginning, I might have had like a 10-day or an 11-day stretch, and I would never make it over the 2 week is like a mark, because that's when our hormones go back into balance. So for me, for a while there, I would always go to like day 11 or 12, 13, and then, oh God, it happened again. And then I would just get so frustrated, I would be so frustrated at some point that then I was able to make it over that hump. And then I had an experience where, now I could do it for 2 months. And then something happened. Usually when people drop is when they don't do their other practices, like when they get stressed. You're more prone to wanting to have sex as a release when you don't stick to the practices. Like, when you don't have connection, like for 3 or 4 days, then you're more prone to it. Or if you're overeating or eating, like for me, if I'm, I barely drink. So if I drink, I'm more likely the next day to feel like, I need something. Right. So over time, you learn, you make your mistakes. It's super important to make your mistake and to learn from them. And so the more mistakes you make, the more they affirm like, oh,
Yeah.
no, this other way is really feeling much better and it's not worth it. And once you've had a really long stretch of carezza and you have an orgasm, the orgasm feels like a little blip and you're like, what was that? Like, why was I thinking I needed to have that? Like, that was like nothing. It's like, it becomes very different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost an interruption. It's almost like it's just in the way of what I was up to. Yeah. So highly recommend the book that we're speaking about. That's called Cupid's Poison Arrow. And if I remember correctly, part of Marnia's work is, really looking at the hormones that you've mentioned and somehow the juxtaposition between dopamine and oxytocin.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about what that is.
Dopamine is a very highly addictive substance that's part of our brain chemicals.
I'm totally fucking addicted to it. I just want to say that. I am so addicted. I know you all are, but I really am. That's the way I feel about it, but go ahead anyways.
Supposedly 13 times more addictive than heroin, but it's also something, that makes money. So a lot of the things in society, the people that sell stuff know this. They play with us and they know how fragile we are in our hormonal systems and how susceptible. The video gaming, the movies, everything. The dopamine gets released through anticipation, not actually it's not a real pleasure hormone. It actually depletes us and makes us feel shitty because once we had a release in the brain, our receptors become numb and you need more and more and more to actually feel something. And what happens, and so real life and real experiences become super dull and boring and it's horrible. Like you become depressed. And anyways, oxytocin is the opposite. It's the good feel hormone, and it gets released when we do bonding based activities and other things. There's breathing things that we can do to release oxytocin. But oxytocin, when your blood is flooded with oxytocin, you feel calm, happy, connected, good, balanced. Yeah. And so part of it is really...
It's that easy, isn't it?
It's not that easy because we have to help our brain to get off the dopamine addiction. And some people are more addicted to it than others. Some of us are more... are more risk takers and so forth, or have more addictive personalities than others. So that's where a lot of the constellation work comes in when I work with couples,
That's interesting. So we go full circle here to really, it's the addiction is based on perhaps a suboptimal use of how the pictures I'm seeing of the world are occurring to me. And so constellation can take away some of that conflict or all of that conflict really by replacing my pictures, and perhaps then has a direct effect on addictions other than dopamine even. Yeah. It seems like constellation could have an effect on the whole addictive process.
Yeah, that's how I got into it. I was severely anorexic and bulimic, which is, it's just as addictive as heroin, an addiction and I was plagued by that for 10 years and nothing helped. And I luckily was brought in contact with this work, and within a very short amount of time, the addictions just fell away. When I was at that point, my chance of survival was at 5%. So they saved my life. Yep.
Wow. That's great. Alex and I were talking today, the further down you go, you get to go higher up. There's something like when you really have something to offer, you got to get sort of to negative X so you can bring back X, and so that sounds like that's been your experience.
For sure.
Carolin, totally fascinating conversation. Way, way fascinating. Totally appreciate it. Well, how can our listeners get a hold of you or contact you or follow you or learn from you, be with you? How, if they're just amused by you, or they, what should they do if they want to get in touch with you?
The best thing is actually to go to my YouTube channel. I'm a very active YouTuber. I have lots of videos on all the things that we talked about. And on every YouTube video, there's all my contact information. And my YouTube channel is just YouTube.com/Carolin Hauser.
Awesome. Super great. Cool. Is there anything else you want to say? I mean, thanks for the great conversation. Really lovely. Is there anything you want to say about, say to me or to our listeners or for yourself, something that you wish we would have touched or you want to cancel and wish we wouldn't have touched? Anything like that is possible.
Well, first of all, I've never shared publicly that I'm a light being. So that was the one thing that came out. I've unpublicly said it, but not publicly. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to say how it is. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that, well, for a lot of people come to me and they're like, what's my purpose? And I don't know my purpose. And you seem to know your purpose. And, people are struggling to find their purpose. What I believe our shared purpose is to have the best experience here and be the freest version of ourselves and have the most pleasurable and most, really live our full potential. And I know it sounds like corny and abstract, but just really live as the person that in your heart you were meant to be here, meant to be here to be. And so to not give up on that, like that's our purpose. And part of living that purpose is to make your state of being a top priority. And it's not what we've been taught. It's not what you see out there in the world. And that takes courage, but I just want to encourage you to do that, because in my own example, when I was courageous enough to really follow that, my entire life turned around. And for the most part, life becomes very magical and worth living then, Yeah.
That's awesome. That's just beautiful. Thank you. It just, there's some of the discussion that I think that we're not going to be able to take on right now starts looking at this whole idea of, what death is, or how totally terrified humanity on the present astral plane is about the whole notion of death, what it really means to be given the opportunity to leave, or to actually leave, or to leave when you're ready, or all of those things. Certainly we touch close to that.
Yeah. Also, you can see how people in power are keeping us. Fear is a very low vibrational state of being, and how well have they done the last year to make sure that 90% of the population lives in total fear now, worse than before.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Carolin. Well, rock on. It's been a deep pleasure to be with you. I'm sure my listeners share that sentiment. It's really beautiful to know you. I really mean it when I say that I feel honored to be in the same astral plane at the same time as you, and then to be friendly with you and to even be a recipient of your work is just it's an opportunity. It's a gift. It's a glorious gift. So thank you so much for being exactly who you are and stepping forth with the power and the spirit that you do, and for then being a stand for that. It's simply beautiful. So totally appreciate it.
Thank you. I received that with an open heart.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, how fun was that? And, whatever's going on with you, you now know there's Carolin Hauser, and there's someone that you can learn from or follow or explore with. And then there's these issues, we talked about. There's Carezza. There's, how to make the pursuit of pleasure part of your life. Those kinds of things that we mentioned is really beautiful. We really did touch powerfully on multiple different subjects that might have an impact. Take a good, deeper peek at it. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being here to this point. Carolin, thanks for being here. It's time now to say goodbye. We'll catch you on the next episode of Welcome to Humanity. This is Dr. Fred, bidding you farewell. And remember, it's all going to be fine, really. It is. It's all going to be fine, because this is how it is, and that's just how it goes. So welcome to humanity. It's really lovely to be with you. Bye for now. I love you all.
Hey, welcome to Humanity family. It's Ryan Levesque here, co-producer of the show. I truly hope you enjoyed Dr. Fred's in-depth conversation today. If you did, and if the conversations we share each week are making a difference for you, could you please take just a moment to leave a rating and a short review on Apple Podcasts? Your enthusiastic review helps new listeners discover the show. Your support here really does make a difference. I'd also like to invite you to reach out to a friend or two who would appreciate today's episode. Maybe shoot them a quick text or email, or maybe pick up the phone and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast so they can be enriched from the discovery of amazing ideas and insights each week. As always, you can find past episodes along with the complete show notes and links at welcometohumanity.net/podcast. If you'd like to explore how working one-on-one with Dr. Fred can help you break through whatever challenges you might be facing with your mental health or well-being, leading to new levels of freedom and vitality, I invite you to reach out to us directly by emailing Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. That's DRFRED at welcometohumanity.net. Thanks so much for listening, and keep an ear out for another captivating conversation next week. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful week, and indeed, a beautiful life. Welcome to humanity.